Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today I want to do another market trend examination involving watch prices on the secondary market. Now, I've seen a lot more videos are coming out lately regarding discussion of a possible crash or a correction or some other shift where prices on the gray market or secondhand are going down versus what they were at. And one of the claims I saw in one of the YouTube videos, I'm not going to call out who it was because it's not really relevant. Everyone has their own assessment and we're all trying to make predictions here. But they had made a statement that their belief was that these price changes are only impacting hype watches and other watches on the secondary market are holding steady. And so this sort of shift or correction or crash or however you might think it's going about is really only tying to those pieces that have gotten overinflated as time has gone by. And I wanted to test that because when I was putting together some of my prior videos, such as my Rolex video on those price changes, which arguably all of those Rolex watches I selected are hype watches, which I would define as they are trading for more used than they go for new, thus they're hyped. I did look at a few other brands at the same time, just very, very rudimentary glances, and it looked like prices were going down elsewhere. And so let's go ahead and put that claim that this only affects hype watches to the test. But let's stick with one company. And so I've chosen Panerai. I've never owned a Panerai. I'm actually not interested at all in Panerais. They just don't suit me. But what I like about Panerai is it's a luxury brand, but most of the watches I don't feel are hype. And I've picked 4 that do not meet my definition of hype. And I guess that's the first thing I need to define for everyone because we might have different definitions of hype. But to me, a watch is not hype if it sells for less used or on the gray market or however we want to think of it, less secondhand than it's sold for retail. So what it sells for currently, or if it's an older now, no longer produced model, what it used to retail at. So if they're selling for less secondhand than they sell for new, I just don't see how it could be considered a hype watch. And I think that's a pretty safe definition, but I just wanted to clarify that that's the approach we're going to go with. Also, versus the Rolex video, I'm going to go ahead and use a 0 value on the y-axis so that you can just see how extreme these changes are or are not relative to the value of the watch. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, to me, when I hear Panerai, I think of 2 broad model categories. I think of the Radiomir and I think of the Luminor. And apologies if I'm mispronouncing anything in this video. I'm not strong on these words. So let's go ahead and start with the Radiomir first. So let's go ahead and start with the PAM 992. That's the Radiomir 8 days 45. And you can see what I've done is I've gathered from watchcharts.com. I've taken select snapshots over a 6-month period. Basically, a snapshot approximately once a week is what I've done on all of these. I can't go back any further than 6 months unless you subscribe to Watch Charts. And I don't know if they want that subscribe data out publicly anyway. So we're sticking with a 6-month examination, which I think is plenty for being able to try and see a trend here. And as you can see from the line, there hasn't been a lot of fluctuation in raw dollars on the PAM 992. We're basically talking about a watch that is floated between $7,600 and $7,800, basically in that range. Now, the PAM 992's retail price is approximately $8,700. And according to this graph data that I've assembled, my peak value is actually on March 1st, and that was $7,828, so about $900 less than retail still. And that was the highest on this graph. And the current price, which is May 9th, is $7,639. So if we consider from the start of my 6-month period, which is November 11th, 2021, all the way through the end, which is March 9th, 2022, we have seen this watch slide very, very slightly by a single percentage point. If we compare it to the peak price that I had at the start of March, it's gone down about 2.5%. So very, very minor, but it is down over the 6-month period versus where it started at. So let's move to another Radiomir. This is the PAM 380, which is the Radiomir Black Seal. And again, same time frames. We're going to use the same time frames on all of these watches. But this is a watch that has been floating around about the $3,500 to $3,600 range. So overall, not very much fluctuation. As you can see from the graph, the line has remained relatively consistent. This watch had a retail price of approximately $4,300. The peak price that I have in my snapshot was from April 11th, and that was $3,614. And the current price from May 9th is $3,514. And so my change from that peak value is a slide of about 2.8%. So that's a little bit bigger slide from peak to current than what we saw in the PAM 992. However, over the 6-month period, if we look back all the way to November 11th, it's only gone down 0.3%. So very, very minor change since the start of the 6-month examination period. And I should have known this at the start, but market average as defined by watchcharts.com, which was the data source for the dollar amounts I've put together, is the typical private sales value. So it's not a dealer value. This is what private sales have been doing for these Panerai watches. So let's jump to the next one, and that's the PAM 01312. This is a Luminor, the Panerai Luminor 1950 44 3 days automatic. That's quite a mouthful, so we'll just stick with the reference number. Now, this is a watch with a retail price of $8,300 approximately. And over this 6-month examination period, we've seen quite a bit more play on the price on this watch. It's ranged from over $6,800 to as little as just under $6,100. And so I think it's a pretty interesting example. And as you can see from the graph, the dip there towards the end of the period, this is much more notable than we saw on either of the Radiomirs. The peak price in my data is March 31st, which was $6,822. The current price, May 9th, is $6,097. So if we look at the change from the peak price to the current price, this watch has slid 10.6%. If we go all the way back to the start of the data in November, then we've seen a price slide of 5.8%. So again, either way we look at it, this is much more dramatic than we saw with the Radiomirs that I put earlier in the video. And so let's go to the final watch I want to talk about, which is another Luminor. This is the PAM 104, or the Panerai Luminor Marina. And the retail price on this watch was listed at $7,100. So in terms of change of price, again, like the other Luminor, and unlike the Radiomirs we looked at earlier, this one's seen a lot more dramatic play also, again, in these more recent snapshot periods. So we've seen a price range of roughly $4,100 to $4,750 or so. So the actual peak price is all the way back in my snapshot from December 31st, 2021. That was when this watch was trading at $4,752. And the current price from May 9th was $4,110. So the change in value from the peak price to the current price is a slide of 13.5%. But even if we look all the way back to November 11th, the start of my 6-month data period, we've still got a slide of 11.6%. So let me go ahead and put up a graph of all 4 of these watches. I've got them abbreviated down to just the reference numbers here, but just like before, the colors are the same for what you were seeing earlier on these 4 models, so it should be relatively easy to track. And the gray line and the yellow line are the 2 lines that reflect the Luminors. And the Luminors have seen significant decreases, in my opinion. And I think it's fair to say that if we look at an examination period, and again, the period is approximately 6 months here, if the peak value in that period and the current value in that period has a spread in double-digit percentages, these were both over 10% declines, that's a significant fall. I'm not saying it's a cratering. It could very well just be a correction, and I'm still not at the point, even with the hype watches, to necessarily think that we're seeing a full-on crash here. But the prices are going down. They went down across the board. Some of these price declines are very, very marginal, and they might stabilize over the next 6 months. But on the Luminor side, especially when you look back and remember that when these drops started to happen, it's interesting. And I think that the market forces that I've discussed in prior videos in terms of what's going on with inflation, obviously we've had some talk about what's going on in China. We've had talks about what's going on in a post-pandemic environment. And all of these things, I think, are having an effect on a lot of watches, not just hype watches. Now, in fairness to those that have felt it's only in terms of hype watches, I mean, there are a lot of watches out there. I mean, looking at this, if you looked at just the Radiomirs and just glanced at the line graphs, in terms of raw dollars, yeah, there's barely been any change. The Luminors are showing more signs, in my opinion, of a price decline, but none of these are hype watches. All of these have been going for significantly less than they retailed at. So I don't think that non-hype watches are immune to price declines. So obviously this may be bad news for the gray market and secondhand dealers in general, or people who are trying to unload watches from their collection. And buyers, this could be a good sign. just given what we know about the broad-based predictions of what's going on with investments and the market in general. And I think those predictions are a lot easier and more stable than just looking at watches as a snapshot. But feeding off of that, it continues to be my belief that this is going to be more and more of a buyer's market for watches. But I'm not an economist. That's just my guess, and I'll leave it there. So if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. It helps the channel out a lot. And if you have thoughts on other things you'd like me to examine, feel free to list them in the comments. I've had a few other people already do that in some of the other videos, and I'm writing down notes of what watches people are kind of interested in learning more about. And if you have thoughts about my analysis, things maybe I should have done differently, feel free to comment on those too. I'm always looking for feedback, and I'll just wish everybody have a great day. Take care.